year has passed since the war between Ukraine and Russia broke out.
Ужасная война. Никто ее никогда не хотел. Сейчас страдают мирные люди.
But the war effectively started 8 years ago with Ukraine's terror bombing of Donetsk. In an exclusive documentary on Press TV.
Now, of course, Ukraine has been shelling Donetsk for months now, indeed intermittently for the last 8 years. When they're not trying to hit military targets, they focus on civilian targets.
British filmmaker Johnny Miller goes to the region to delve into the heart of the conflict between the two neighboring countries.
Now I'm standing in front of what is or used to be a school. It's just around the corner from my apartment here in Donetsk, and recently it was hit by the Ukrainian army, most likely with NATO-supplied weapons. It's just one of many schools that have been hit here in Donetsk by the Ukrainian army as they try to terrorize the local population. And many children have been killed as well. Just in the last 10 days, I've been to 2 funerals of children, 6-year-old Alina and the 8-year-old Maria, who were killed in playgrounds along with other children. Indeed, children killed in war, for me, is a particular failing of humanity. And increasingly, here in Donetsk, it's being done with NATO-supplied weapons. Now, there's almost no Western reporters here in Donbase, Russian-held Donbase. And so the Western world simply doesn't get to hear about what damage to civilians and how many civilians and children are killed with the weapons that NATO supplies to Ukraine. So it's very, very important that a message is put out to NATO countries and indeed to Ukraine that NATO weapons should not be used to target and kill civilians, because that's what's happening here in Donetsk. Whatever you think about the war, it's important that Ukraine stops targeting civilians with NATO weapons.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, a lot of people ask me why are the Ukrainians targeting civilians there, and it can seem surprising to some people. Only about 10 days ago, I was sitting in a cafe in the center of Donetsk near my house. The building shook, the windows shattered, landed over myself, and 2 missiles landed 20 meters either side of the cafe, one outside my local supermarket as well. And this is, I know this area very well, it's simply civilians there, no military targets. So why is Ukraine intentionally shelling civilians? And I recently read a comment by a Ukrainian general who said that Russia will start targeting civilians soon in Bakhmut because they're failing militarily. I think that's a very revealing comment, because that's what Ukraine has been doing. They started in 2014 when they're failing to defeat the so-called pro-Russian separatists militarily. They resorted to shelling civilians in the hope of dampening the civilian population's will and support for the local authorities there. So it started happening in 2014, famously when Ukrainian jet bombed the center of Luhansk. Horrific scenes, I mentioned that in the documentary. And it's been going on intermittently over the last 8, going on 9 years now. And since Russia sent its troops into Ukraine, it's escalated. It's such an important story because it's the reason why the vast majority of people in the Donbase region that's controlled by Russia no longer want to be part of Ukraine. I mean, they say to me, when your own government is bombing your own people, I mean, everyone has near-miss stories like I do. Everyone knows people who've been killed.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Children have been killed. How can you continue being part of Ukraine? And I think that's the reason I made the documentary. Obviously, I spent a lot of time there. The reason I focused on that is to say that there is another way to end this war. NATO says the only way is to send Ukraine weapons to take back this territory. Well, if you listen to the civilians in Donetsk and Crimea, for example, the vast majority of people in Crimea are pro-Russian, then there is another way to end this war, and that's by listening to the civilians on both sides. And it will mean Ukraine has to give up territory, but increasingly the world is understanding that.